dealing with my parents getting older, and as they got to the point where they died, it was really hard. I was the oldest daughter. My sister had died in her 40s, so I was the daughter. And there was just no way I couldn't help them. I mean, there were times when I thought, I just can't do this anymore. I remember I had my mother in a wheelchair. She didn't know who I was anymore. She was senile. And I had my father in a wheelchair. He was very, very sick with cancer and in terrible pain all the time. And I was taking the two of them in the wheelchairs down a hill. And I thought, I'm going to lose them. Literally, they're going to fly out of their wheelchairs. You know, sometimes you had to laugh, but I started sobbing. I'll never forget this. It was the worst moment of all those years, and it was quite a few years I sort of see 84 to 86 as the time when it begins. I noticed this in my parents' friends, I noticed it in my parents. And let me just, as an aside, one friend of my parents stayed with them until the end. My mother didn't know who she was, but she went up and visited them, and I take her out to lunch at least once every 2 weeks. I drive out to see her and take her out because she was so good to them. Because people let you go as you get older. They forget who you once were. They don't honor that. And I think as a child, you honor who your parents were. They took care of you. It's your turn to take care of them. But it was just so painful watching, especially my mother saying, how do you do, dear? Who are you? And I'd say, I'm your daughter, Tina. Oh, yes, I knew that. And then 2 minutes later, and who are you? You know, this was terrible because this woman had been so alive. She was like this whirling helicopter. She was so full of energy, and she took me to task. We'd go shopping together or go to a museum together, and I was exhausted being with her. She had so much spunk and energy. And now, you know, she just sort of shuffled. She could hardly walk, and I had to keep remembering that other person. And my father, who had been, I think every girl loves their daddy, and had been this just charming, loving father to me. And all of a sudden, he was in so much pain that he was really horrible, you know? He was so mean. He'd call me and yell at me and say, get up here right now, and I need to have lavender soap. I need to have these things. He just wanted me to be there. And I'd get up there. This is when I had them in the nursing home, which was beautiful, after I couldn't have them at home anymore. But he'd always find excuses to have me come up, and I'd jump in the car after being on the soap and ride out there to see what I could do for them. And then he'd be horrible to me. And I remember there was a man at the hospital who was a psychiatrist. And I said, I can't do this anymore. My father, my perfect father, is using me. He was so afraid that he was dying. He was scared of dying, you know. My mother didn't know. She was perfectly happy. You know, she was singing the Star Spangled Banner at the Yankee games. At least that's what she thought she was doing. So he was just so awful. And this man said to me that they're going to take it out on their caregivers. And I thought this was an important piece of information to give every woman, and it's mostly women, but there are a lot of men too, who are taking care of their mother and fathers when they turn on them. Because they turn on them only because they're alive and they're the closest person to them. So they really go at you, and it was so painful. And when I got that piece of information from this man, I was able to understand my father better. And he also talked to my father. He said, you cannot do this. You cannot turn on the person who loves you the most. And I thought that was something to share in this book. And that was a great reason I think I did the book, because people don't know this. They think, who's this horrible person that used to be a nice person? But they don't know the fear that that person is dealing with. I mean, you know, the end of your life, it's coming. And it's very scary, and it's very painful. And my father was afraid of my mother not being alone in the world, which she was when he died. And I kept promising him when he was dying. I kept saying, Daddy, I'll take care of Mom. I will take care of her. You don't have to worry. You can let go. And he couldn't let go. There was nothing left of him, just nothing. You know, he was this little thin person. He'd been this big, strapping man. And this is what, you know, every woman, every man who's a caregiver has to know, that they're scared to die, and they're going to turn on you. And so you have to love them. You have to love them so they can go.